Welcome, welcome to this wonderful June idea swap on helping chapters embrace change. I think we all have needs for our chapters to change. Sometimes it's big, like structure, or medium, like, oh, come on, accept the new volunteer model, or maybe it's about updating your affiliation agreement, or maybe it's an easy change, like we're going to switch our schedules. But resistance to change is absolutely natural. And anytime you introduce a new process or a technology, you really have to think about change management from the very start. You know what, though? I think that a large miss for us is understanding that sometimes we also, even though we understand change management, we don't spend enough time on what I'm going to call today the chapter's change readiness quotient. And that's what we want to talk about today. So I'm super excited. I think this is going to be a conversation that's going to help many of us really have an opportunity to have some good idea swapping. Now, as always, I'd like just to make sure we all know who the team is. The webinar is brought to you by the partnership of Billhighway and Mariner Management. In fact, frankly, this topic actually comes out of that partnership. And the reason why I mention this, that it comes out of that partnership, is because you may think when you're connecting with Billhighway, I'm buying a technology solution. And of course, yes, you are. Or you may think when you work with Mariner, I'm buying a process or a structural or a training solution. And of course, yes, you are. However, you are also getting along with that package change management. And that's where this idea of the change readiness quotient comes in. Because something that we've discovered in all of the hundreds of associations we've collectively worked with is that is what really helps drive change. So I want to get us talking about that very specifically. We've got some ideas. I think all of you have some ideas as well. So this is how we're going to run today's agenda. We're going to go ahead and talk about changes ahead. And then we're going to talk about how you can bake those into some training options. And finally, we're going to use the breakout rooms to share. So very simple process. It's an idea swap, which is why you can all see who's in the room. We're using the meeting platform. It's not a webinar where Peggy gets to talk. You know, Peggy can talk. But I really want to give an opportunity for you all to talk. And so I'm hoping that we can get into those breakout rooms and be able to talk about it. I got to put a pause on that for just 1 minute because I got two pieces of very exciting news to share with you. And that is what's coming up. Super excited. I have lined up I got many favorite CRPs, but 3 of my favorite CRPs to join us in July for a whole session on effective practices in communicating with chapter leaders, July 27th. Yes, it's the dog days of summer almost, but join us at 12 o'clock Eastern for a really good conversation and hear from your peers on that. But are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? We're going back to in-person. Okay, I may have shouted that. We're so super excited about this. We are not bringing in CEX in its full glory because we know there's concerns about where are we on the COVID roller coaster and all those things. So we're going to do it nice and safe. We're going to do small workshops. We're going to spend part of our wonderful day on a deep dive on chapter performance and then give an opportunity for topical topics solution rounds where you bring your own question. We will open registration as soon as we confirm locations. We will have 1 in DC and 1 in Chicago. Oh my gosh, mark your calendars. I'm super excited. And Sarah's grinning and she's going, oh, Peggy, you are more excited than the entire team. And yes, it's true. But I just think it's really great for us to get back in person and have some really good, solid conversation. And we've got a case study that we're going to bring to that very particular set of workshops. So anyway, stop this. Let's move on. Change. Very hard. What makes it easier, I believe, is when the people that we're trying to embrace the change really see the solutions, the newness, the freshness that it brings. So there's lots of change models that you can follow to do this. I don't know how many of you would go ahead and raise your hand or give me the thumbs up. How many of you follow like Kotter's 8 steps, or maybe it's Lewin's unfreeze, change, refreeze model, or whatever model whatever model you have. I just saw somebody said that the webinar listed. Hang on a second, we'll get back to those dates. Whatever model of change management you like, go ahead and throw it in chat, and let's share about some of the change management pieces that we're talking about. But this, by the way, is not going to be on change management. We believe firmly that doesn't matter which method of change management you like to go. Everybody has a theory they're comfortable with. Find the one that works for you, that works in your culture, and follow it. But we will say that there are 3 things that make it more effective, whichever one it is. First is you must take time between each step, whether it's a 3-step process or can I do 8-step process or an 8-step process, to debrief. It's your opportunity to say, are we really ready to move on to that next step? It's an opportunity to say, I need more time here. Or maybe it's an opportunity to speed forward. Really important that you take the time to debrief each of those steps. Number 2, I'm going to tell you that really, and it's actually our mantra here at Mariner, is follow the compass, not the clock. A number of years ago, someone said, oh, that's a cute little logo Mariner has. What does it mean? And I said, it means follow the compass. Yes, the clock is important, but if you really want to embrace change, particularly in your chapter or your volunteer systems, being able to work with that cohort along the process and giving yourself the time is really, really critical. But the third thing is, what is the chapter's change readiness quotient? That's where we're going to focus. By the way, if you're really trying to look at some other different change management models, go over to mindtools.com, mindtools.com. And there's a couple of really good descriptions of those. Okay. Anyway, so we believe that that if we can really help prepare our leaders, get them in a place where they are open to having conversations for change, it would be, we're really that much ahead. So what I want to do right now is have you throw into chat, what questions about the topic of change do you bring with you today? So it could be you might share with us, and we're going to go ahead and if you're not muted, go ahead and mute yourself, and then we'll bring you back on again if we need room to chat. So go ahead and chat. What's the question that you bring about change today? Maybe it's actually, I need to get this change done. Or maybe it's, well, how do I help volunteers anticipate change? But go ahead, throw into chat, what are the changes that you bring with you today? Give you guys a second to catch up with that. And if you don't have any any questions about change, feel free to share maybe a change that you've accomplished already. Letting some folks catch up with that. Here we go. A great question. How much do I have to prepare a stakeholder buy-in before making a change? Is there a general change timeline? Then how do you help chapter leaders see that they don't have that they don't have to do it the way they always have? I love that. DEI changes +1 on the first question. All right, keep them coming. Let's attack some of those questions. Let me start by asking though a couple of questions about your change agenda. I'm going to give poll number 1. Keep answering. Yes, you're honoring past appointments, but moving volunteers to focus on the future. Yes, encouraging chapters to hold meetings in a different format. Yeah, so Leanne, that you would think that was a medium, right? But we have to really help them begin to see the opportunities there. All right, keep these coming in. I'm going to launch a poll number 1. What I'm asking here is it's a long list, so make sure you scroll down. I'm asking here, who's implemented a change in their chapters in the past 3 to 5 years? And I've given you kind of a potpourri of ones. A lot of us have updated affiliation agreements. Some folks have updated data protocols or how they can access their data. Some have, done some governance change, maybe reporting procedures, standards and requirements. Maybe you've changed your awards program. Maybe you've brought in a new technology or new support systems. I know in the benchmarking study, we had a number of people change membership models. And of course, we did have a number of people in that particular benchmarking study talking about they've either closed or merged. They found this way where they're either, sunsetting some chapters, maybe pulling some chapters together. And then there's other, and our rule here on all of our idea swaps and webinars, the Billhighway Mariner rule is if you click other, share it in chat. So we all know what is on your mind. Okay, I've got most of you, almost, I've got close to 80% of you that have weighed in. So go ahead, I'm gonna give you couple more seconds here. I know there's a lot of things to check, so keep going. Yeah, Shelly, absolutely. So logos, finances under HQ, so logos is one level and finances under HQ is the other. So that was, I would call like a medium large, right? Excellent. Oh, that's cool. The other idea of expanding our chapter model so all members have access. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and show you that in this room today, we've got a lot of people who have implemented change. So if you are thinking about one of these change elements, go ahead, throw it in chat and say, who said reporting procedures? I want to talk with you. This is all about finding the people that you can network, okay? What falls under standards and requirements, Shelley? I think of standards and requirements actually as I put the logo under there. So anytime that you're shifting what a chapter has to do in terms of being in alignment, and it's not, I'm going to say that it's not about, how do you bring your data down, but it's going to be like the standard says you have to use this kind of a branding, right? Or the standard says you have to accept this kind of a membership protocols, or the standard says you must meet these particular requirements to stay in good standing with the alignment. So lots of things, and a good association. That good is a terrible word to use. An effective association with a good, effective CP chapter and component practices are probably tweaking standards and requirements on an annual basis because times change, right? All right, let me ask similar question, but what's on your future change list? So what are you looking at? And I'll be honest with you, part of the reason why we're asking this is because always Billhighway and Mariner try to make sure our webinars and idea swaps reflect what is on your mind. And so if you tell us, we might be able to bring something to you. The first one that shot up was affiliation agreements. And I have promised several times, I have a very good friend who's a legal mind that I want to bring on and maybe do an affiliation agreement swap. So excellent thing there. So anyway, this is your chance to sort of tell us, what's in the future, but also it helps us in today's conversation begin to say, okay, how do you, and today's conversation is about that readiness quotient. How do you kind of get those chapters ready for this kind of a change before you ever speak change, right? So I've got about 50% of you weighing in. Now, if you don't have change in mind, that's okay. Go ahead and let this poll go by. Maybe you are thinking about it. You haven't actually committed to it, but there's a change that certainly is on your mind, and it may be on your individual mind versus, say, the C-suite's mind or the board's mind, but go ahead and put that in. And of course, on that other, tell us if we didn't capture it in this list where you've got it. I've got just about 3/4 of you, closing in on 80% of you logged in. Let me give you another second or so here. Some great questions. Let's see some. Yeah, Michael, that's absolutely true. Sometimes the question is that national is not changing and wanting the chapters to change to conform the national image and view. That's a deeper question, isn't it? But thank you for putting that in there. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now because I've got almost 90% of you in. I'm going to share the results. So affiliation agreements, technology and support systems, governance are your two top ones, with affiliation agreements, data protocols, standards and requirements coming in. And there's a couple of membership models there as well. So lots of cool changes. If you've done one of these changes, go ahead and throw in chat anything that you can about guidance about those changes. Now, as just a real quick thing, if you haven't been with us before, the chat is something we share back out again afterwards. That's why we love to have you in chat talking, because there's an opportunity. Sometimes the best things that come out are not from my voice, but actually from things shared in the chat. So share in the chat and we'll make sure you get there. Okay, I have actually one more question, which is very relevant to what today's conversation is about. And that is, I want to find out what kind of training options you offer to your component leaders. Now, this list is a list that came right from the chapter benchmarking study. So we'll compare the results ultimately to what we saw in the chapter benchmarking study. I think all of these are pretty clear. The dedicated leadership conference, it could be virtual, it could be in person, workshops at other association meetings, webinars. I view a dedicated leadership conference different than maybe the series of webinars that you're doing. Website portal, a chapter leadership training through your LMS, your learning management system. And do you have an online community? Do you have designated mentors? You know, folks that can work with it. I know one group that I've worked with has a chapter ambassadors, which are dedicated, designated mentors for certain chapters. So a bunch of other ways. If you put other in there, again, let's share in chat what you're doing. We're always looking for other ways to build training. So I've got about a half of you in. Let me give you a few more seconds here. Again, it's a multiple choice list. One of the things that we found out in the chapter benchmarking study, interestingly, is that organizations were doing more or doing more types of training than they had in the past. And I think that's because with the adoption of virtual, we've been able to sort of expand some of our offerings, which is really cool. Love seeing the uptick in using the LMS. Onboarding series. Wow, that's great, Sharon. We want to probably hear a little bit more about that at some point, because I think that's a great thing, and a newsletter. Excellent. All right. I've got most of you on here. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll so we can keep the conversation going. But let me share with you that similar to our results from the benchmarking study, webinars and the online community, followed by the dedicated leadership conference, are the most often asked. Website portal coming in right after those two. The LMS is very is just two of you, I believe. So I'm going to suggest you might want to begin to look at your go over there and talk to your learning team and see what you've got. All right. So let's build on this as we have our today's conversation. Now, I want to mention to you that there are a number of ways to build the change readiness quotient. We're going to talk about how to bake it into training, because I believe, in my humble opinion, that our ability to, because we're already investing in the training programs, to bake this in allows us to do this really wonderful low drum beat of preparation that helps our chapter leaders begin to see what changes are possible, why I should change, getting a sort of a community agreement around change, and then being able to say, do a stakeholder meeting and talk about what changes would be useful. But I do want to acknowledge, and I think that there are some really interesting things being done outside the training mode. The first are a number of associations are offering innovation grants. These are designed to get chapters to try new things. So you're rewarding them for trying new things, thinking a little bit outside the box. A couple of associations do this in lieu of a dues give back or a rebate. But think about how you can use your money in a way to sort of drive that sense of trying small bits of change. So innovation grants. The second one is just having this, what I call this ongoing sandbox, right? On an ongoing basis, you're trying out new ideas through pilot programs and mini projects. This is the kind of thing, and we talked about the trickle up concept in a webinar a couple of years ago, and I don't know if Sarah can possibly find that, but if not, we'll send that to you afterwards. And this builds sort of on that concept. Also, you see things happening at at a micro letter, and you look at them and you begin to build them out and see if you can pilot them with other groups. But it's also like, before you think about, say, for example, a new technology, a new communications platform for chapters, you might have a couple up and running and just have some beta spaces where people are able to kick it. But basically, it's about having this ongoing, let's try something different, so that your leaders get in the mode. The culture says trying new things and seeing what sticks is valuable. The third is this benchmarking, this idea of letting the peers talk to each other and showing what they're doing, so the group can sort of zone in and say, wait a minute, we're all having problems with volunteerism, or we're all having problems with getting people to our events, or we're all having problems with keeping our websites up to date, whatever it is. I've seen a couple of associations, 2 trades and 2 professional, where they've actually put this so it's online, and it's an opportunity for me to fill mine out, and then it shows me against the average of the entire chapter group, so that I can look at, I could say, oh, well, look, and then they convene conversations around, well, let's look at this subset of the benchmarking and see where we're the same and see where there's some differences. So anyway, benchmarking allows people to begin to think, where might change be appropriate? And the last one is this idea of baking our chapters into the strategic planning process of the national, I put in head, call it headquarters, call it parent, call it main organ, whatever you want to, the central organization. But we're all doing strategic planning on a regular basis. And the question is, are we engaging them? Now, I don't mean engaging them through a survey, right? I'm talking about if you're doing a really intentional strategic planning process at that main level, you are doing an environmental scanning process, right? You are looking at, where is the profession or the trade going? Where are associations going? Involving them in some of those conversations begins to lift up their understanding about that. So I'm going to suggest that all 4 of these ways are ways of building the change readiness quotient outside of training. And does anybody use any of these? Go ahead and chat. Do you engage your chapters in strategic planning? Do you have innovation grants? Do you have a sandbox mentality? Maybe you've got a benchmarking program up and running. Go ahead, if anybody's got any of those, share them in chat. Give you a few seconds here to connect to chat. Or if you have a question about any of these, if I don't have the answer, I can get back to you on that. Oh, excellent. Thank you. Sarah has put in 2 great links. At least I'm sure they're great, because if they come from the knowledge base on there's been great. I love it, Will. Excellent. Innovation grants through a USG funded program. I love that. We'd love to hear more about that. And Shelley, I was waiting for you to weigh in here. You are one of the folks I heard about that. So I love that. And on changing our benchmark. Great. Excellent. All right. Keep those things coming in here. This is the way you're able to make connections. And this is all a part of our networking. Oh, Diana, I love that idea. That's great. 2 things, a 2 for there on hers. All right. Keep coming in. We're just about at the half-hour point. So I want to give you some ideas around, we stole your bright spots. Awesome. I want to give you some ideas about how to bake it into training. And then I want to put us into some breakout rooms for a quick conversation. If we train leaders to focus on the right things, if we engage them in effective decision making, they will spot the need for change, or minimally understand the opportunities for change. So what I'm saying here, and my whole preface for the rest of this part of this thing, is a lot of the work that I have done with chapter leaders. I have worked with, I counted it up, I think we're closing in on 100 different associations for volunteer training, leadership training, staff volunteer training. And through all of this, what I have found is that if we teach our chapter leaders where the right focus is, how to use, how to have effective decision making, they oftentimes come to us and say, we need change here. Minimally, they say, I think there's something we could do differently, but they really want to put their heart and their hands and their head behind that. So I think if we're more intentional about all this training we're doing, we can actually put into action what I'm going to call this kind of this drumbeat of getting our chapter leaders to up their chain readiness quotient. So example number one is, are you baking into your training programs a opportunity for learning how to define meaningful outcomes, right? So I'm talking about getting them to shift their focus from a checklist mentality of, we have to do 7 meetings this year, let's organize our 7 meetings, to something along the lines of the meaningful outcome. The reason why we're doing 7 meetings is, and this is what we need to teach them how to ask, like, why are we doing 7 meetings? Well, we're doing 7 meetings because we want to engage members, and we want a variety of meetings. So we engage a variety of members. Therefore, we have to be able to say, how do we prove that we have engaged a variety of members? Maybe it's around, well, our market penetration is 5%. We've got prospects out here. We want to build that to 6 or 7%, right? So the outcome is that. So how do I do that? Well, it may not be 7 meetings. So if we get them to focus on what are they trying to accomplish, then they change their focus and they say, well, what do I need to get that to accomplish that? Oh my gosh, I think there's a space that I'm going to need some help, some change, some opportunity. Maybe it's around, not that I had put on all these events, but that all of my events are highly satisfying to members. Maybe it's, we got a big year like COVID. Many of our chapters, geographic components were focused on regulatory issues, industry issues related to their neighborhood, so to say. Maybe it's about that. The focus here, it's not how many events you hold. So we have to train chapters what is a meaningful outcome. Now, for many of you, that's going to be around this conversation of how many members, right, did you engage, okay? But for other folks, it may be really about, did you move the advocacy needle? We have to move the advocacy needle. Or for one organization, one of the things that we did is going to tie into something I'm going to say in just a few moments. We found out that a large percentage of folks that attend their meetings are actually non-members, and they're like one level past the core membership. They probably will never be members. But what we were able to do is shift the outcome, is to broaden the conversation for this particular profession, which is a very highly specialized profession, in a way that builds awareness. Outcomes. What are the outcomes we want? Because that will get them to begin to ask, I can't get it doing the way I'm doing it now. Secondly, do we train them to think in terms of measurable outcomes and metrics? Or do we train them to think about, I got all my boxes on this requirement sheet checked? If they don't know how to set measurable metrics, right, then they will consistently think that if you just gave them more money, or if you just love them more, it's going to move the needle, because they're not doing anything wrong. So train them the value of metrics, give them examples of metrics, help them benchmark those metrics, but teach them about what is a metric that is measurable and makes a difference. It could be that member engagement. It could be volunteer engagement, building the pipeline. It could be the event satisfaction. It could be the impact that you're having at the local level. 3, are you not only giving them the metrics, but are you teaching them how to understand and use data? So long before we can get them to embrace a change, They have to be already using their own data. Let me give you a really poignant example that just actually happened yesterday. I'm working with an association, and this is a project that we frequently now do with our chapters, and it's a precursor to the change management system. But we do a data project. And what we do is we ask all of the chapters, and usually it's just a handful of chapters. Sometimes it's a broader view of chapters, to give us all of their participation data that they have. Then we do an analysis of that data, and it allows us to have a completely different conversation. So I was talking with the chapter leader yesterday on a call, who is in the midst of this practice, and I asked for some data, and she had some questions around the data. And as we're talking back and forth, she said, well, we've always counted seats filled, but if I'm understanding what you're saying is that if I know how many individuals came to an event, then I know how many individuals didn't come to an event. I said, that's right. And she goes, well, we have all of these support groups, and I would want to know, do people come to support groups also come to the CE events or not? She goes, my gut tells me not. And I said, very likely they don't. And she goes, a Venn diagram. I said, that's exactly right. You now begin to know that this cohort here likes this kind of activity. This cohort likes this kind of activity. There's always going to be that center point. What makes these people in the center different from these people or these people? And to what degree do all of these folks give you a satisfaction rating for the chapter? She goes, well, we're doing so many things, and we have to bring our book of business to a reasonable length. Said, that's how you'll do it. Oh, she began asking questions. She said, what if all of a sudden she was ready to think differently about processes around data? And then she said the ultimate thing. Well, state legislation just changed a licensing requirement to 15 hours, and we're trying to debate whether to do the 15-hour or the 6-hour. And I said to the board, are we a CE provider or are we a community builder? I said, that's the kind of question. I said, do you know why that question is important? And she said, yes, it's a huge lift to put together a 15. I said, who else would put together the 15? Well, the state-based organization should put together the 15. I said, that's right. Now you begin to understand how you make a difference to your members. That is the power of data. We need to teach them how to use data before we tell them there's a reason for change. The data tells the story. If we teach them how to collect and report data, if we teach them what is a data-driven decision, that Venn diagram, right? If we then encourage them to create consistency in how we're all collecting the data across the system, we can match information. I think there are people in my chapter which are checkbook members, but what I might find out is that those are the folks that are engaging nationally. The national has a bunch of checkbook members, could be the folks that are engaging in the chapter. We begin to see personas. Let's train them. I want us to also train them how to listen to their members. I'm talking about training them. How do you collect input? What's an effective polling? How do you act on the listening? Because sometimes they do a good job of doing a survey at the end of the event, and then they don't review the survey. They don't look at it. I was teaching another group of chapter leaders how to take the open-ended, go through an Excel process that allows them to do a content analysis. It's very simple content analysis, but then allow them to see some themes in those responses. The power of that. When we teach them to do these things, they come to us with questions. And finally, do we train our chapters to explore trends? I want to tell you another real quick story about this, which is really, I think it blew my mind. I was not brought in at the beginning of this process for this huge chapter change that I'm doing with an organization. The first thing that was done was they brought somebody in. They had just done their strategic planning nationally. They brought a speaker in to talk about the ASAE foresight drivers to these chapter leaders. Now, these are not sophisticated leaders, okay? Many of them are in what I would call a mid-career type of positions in a hierarchy. So they're not their own C-suite, right? But she did this whole conversation to 1.5 day virtual workshop, and it was all about what's changing in the world around our chapters. It got that thinking just shifted enough to open the door. The group collectively said, let's put together a task force and look a little bit more closely at the impact that we've identified. So using the foresight drivers in the appropriate way helped. I was on a call 2 days ago. Another organization is really looking at some pretty dismal trends if things don't change. And they are contingent membership. So everybody in the system has to change. And one of the really cool things they did was they projected membership out by generation and by other cohorts out to 2026 based on the previous, I think it was 10 years, right? And they showed the penetration that they had for boomers across generational and how it was decreasing and decreasing and decreasing. They brought it down and they showed what 26 would look like with no change. The light bulbs went off, right? They're not even talking about change. They're just saying, we all have to figure something out. And they're giving data that shows things, right? I think that the other thing that came, and I sort of mentioned about one of the data analysis sessions that we went through is we found out that a large number of folks coming to those events, as I mentioned, were non-members. But it helped everybody reframe. And someone said, well, how do you get, when the organization doesn't want to change and you just want the chapters to come to you? Well, the aha doing that data, when I first showed it to the national staff, their aha was like, bingo, maybe we're not thinking about this channel in the exact same way. So strategic thinking, trends really make a difference. So I want to throw in, and I'm going to go ahead. We're going to do some 10-minute rounds in in our breakout rooms, and I'm going to get ready. We're going to get ready to throw you into some breakout rooms. It's going to be completely random. But right now, go ahead and throw into chat, what training channels do you use to help support change conversations? Okay, so throw that into chat because I want to warm you up. What I'm going to have you do is in the idea swaps, I've just thrown a whole lot of stuff at you, right? We had the 4 ways to do the readiness that we're not training, but I hopefully kind of gave you a runway for how to use training to do this. So what I'm going to ask you to do is go into these and have a quick conversation. I'm going to ask you to go ahead first, do a roundtable like who am I, but then talk about how can I bake something, a skill or a knowledge point in to my training that helps them be prepared for change, right? So think first of what training channels am I using that I can have a quick impact on, and then what skill or what knowledge point? Is it something about trends, something about foresight? Is it about how to use data? Is it about a data process? Good. So David, you've got a number of places, but I love the playbook in particular. You could begin to put stuff in the playbook and then trickle it out to these other places. Excellent. All right, this is what we're going to do. That's your group conversation, right? But you guys own the breakout rooms. So let me ask Sarah, can you do the breakout rooms or do I need to?
How many do we want to do, Peggy?
How many people do we have on right now?
I've got 20 on right now.
Excellent. So why don't we do 3s or 4s would be good. Oops, we got somebody else leaving. Why don't we do rooms of 4 and see what happens? I'm going to give you 10 minutes in here as an opportunity to chat.
All right, I'm going to send everyone in.
All right, I'll see you in 10. And as we are wrapping up the conversations in the breakout room, we're bringing you all back in to the room to pick up the conversation. Some folks coming back in again. As you come back in again, I know it was a quick conversation. Breakout rooms are always quick, but go ahead and throw an aha into the chat. What did you all talk about? Was there an aha? Maybe there was an aha before you went in. Go ahead and throw any of those comments in the chat, so we can, of course, as always, we can use those for continuing to share and build our content and being able to generate some good dialogue back and forth. So it looks like we have most of the folks back in the room. So was the conversation good? Give me maybe a thumbs up, or, just kind of jump on and tell us a little bit about it. Very good. Excellent. Very cool. Excellent. All right. So I did have the opportunity. So go ahead and make sure you're putting in chat any ahas or any questions lingering. I went back and found the questions that we asked at the beginning to make sure that we had the opportunity to address questions. One person had, or there's a couple of people that asked similar questions around how much do we prepare folks for change? Is there a timeline? If you're doing a structural change, what's the timeline? And I love when I can just pull all of those questions together and go, it depends. But truth of the matter is that it depends upon, and that's the reason why we talked about this topic, the chapter readiness quotient in terms of how much time it's going to take. But it's also, to a certain degree, the commitment at the national or board level, because any particular change is going to require that the board is able to support it and to resource it. So I always say to folks, what's the true commitment at the top of the organization in a way to make sure that this change can go through. I have worked with organizations on significant chapter change, and I would say to you that I have never seen it under a year of good, solid conversations and work, a year to a place where you'll begin implementation. However, I have also seen it take much longer. With a current situation right now, they already set that they wouldn't even be looking at implementation until the end of 23, and we've been working together for a while. So some of it is your culture, some of it is the readiness quotient, some of it is the expansiveness of the change. And the other element of this is change has to have a budget with it, and I always suggest that you put maybe the development of the, preparing for the change, walking through the process in 1 year's budget, and then think of implementation in a second year. So were I you, and it was a significant chapter change, I would be looking at 18-month to 2-year horizon. If you get done sooner, excellent. But it also makes folks keep in mind that you've got a bunch of things happening. They are doing a planning calendar. They're doing a leadership calendar, all of those things. And because all of those things are happening, they will feel more comfortable if they know that they've got a full rotation before they have to make those changes. Somebody asked about DEI changes. Oh my gosh, have I got a story for you. And this comes from CAMFT, which is a wonderful state organization for marriage and family therapists out in California. They are a large state association. I'm going to say 14,000 plus members and chapters and special, all kinds of, they're a pretty complex organization. They brought in and I can get her name and get it to you, a really wonderful DEI speaker who did a keynote session and then a workshop session. But here was the secret sauce. They set up a coaching program, and any chapter could opt in for her to work with their board to identify what DEI meant to them and how they could act on it. And she's worked with a number of the chapters, and some of the stuff coming out of those chapters are fabulous. So just getting the right person, but it was not just speaking at you, and they had a little kit, right? A little toolkit, but it was having that really that opportunity to have somebody sit at the table with the individual boards. Now, interestingly enough, and the reason why I know so much about this is that part of the project I'm doing with them also is a chapter performance coaching. And I'm getting the opportunity on a one-to-one basis to sit in the room at the board with these individual chapter leaders, identifying where do they want to change? Where do they want to go? How do they use their data? So just that's a great little model, but the DEI in its, I'll get the name and we'll send it out in the follow-up email. So the person that asked about DEI changes, totally love that. And I think it was Barbara, one of my favorite people on the call. You all are my favorites, but she said, how can I ID small wins to keep us moving forward? I love that question. And the reason why I love that question is because one of the things that I always suggest that anybody does, I do this for myself and I do this for any other client, is as we put together the plan, we set milestones. Like, we're going to get to this place and we're going to announce it, and we're going to get to this place and we're going to announce it. The small things that I look at is, for example, we will generally start with a census, and we'll say, we'll do the census and we're going to celebrate all of the bright spots we see in the census. Wow, look at all these bright spots. How do we build on them, right? And so part of what I would suggest is you sit down from beginning to end and you say, where is anything worth celebrating? Where can I get a nice kernel out of it, right? If you, one of the organizations that I was just doing their chapter, I was one of their speakers, but I got there and they had a number of vendors. They had some vendor tables out in the registration area where they were spending some time talking about how do you use technology in your chapter. Then they had some really cool show and tells. And one of the vendors, I think it might have been Member Clicks, but I could be wrong, had a special project. And if they could get people on there, they were able to, a certain number of people they could celebrate. And you know what? They did. So it was really cool. So find those little points along the way. And then I think it was Shelley. Someone said, how do we get them to see they don't have to do it the same way? So I love this question also, because change happens when I realize not only is a need to change, but I see the option, right? Because we understand that that's part of the unfreeze, reimagine, refreeze, right? So, you know what the power is? I mean, truthfully, the power is showing them examples of how to do it from their own people. Innovation grants is a great way for you to get chapters to try things and then to like socialize those cool ideas that come around. When they see one of their peer chapters doing something differently, that's when they begin to go, oh, maybe I could do that too. So that brings us to the top of the hour. I absolutely love talking with all of you. And I love that, David. Excellent, excellent. You know, there's so many very cool ways that we can help our chapter leaders up their change readiness quotient. So I hope we've given you some ideas. I hope that you're able to use some of these and act on them. Please, please, please let us know in chat any lingering questions, and we will go. I'm sorry, Shelley, we will do another 30 minutes another time. Audrey, as soon as we have the registration link, we will send it out to all of you. It is October. I don't remember the dates. I can go back. Hey, you know what I got? Hang on a second. I could go this a faster way, but I'm going to go this way. Oh, I went all the way through, didn't I? Where is it? hang on a second. There you go. 2 dates right there. So we're going to be in Chicago on October 13th, and we're going to start in DC on October 11th are the 2 dates. So excellent, excellent, excellent. All right. The last thing, if anybody wants to know, we're going to put the link in for the benchmarking study. I know I'm giving you a little bit of a mind brown here. Here you go. There's the link. We're going to put it into that because so much of the information comes from that. Yes, in person, Cheryl. Yes, in person. And finally, thank you. Now get out there and go increase your chapter and component leaders. Change, readiness, quotient. See you next month. Talking about communicating.